Hey, good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday to you. Josh is Severe Weather. Hope you guys are having a great week here. We are about a month away from spring and starting to warm back up after a chilly wave of weather here, but we're not done with winter yet. We've got a couple more storms to track, especially across the northern and eastern United States. Even though things are starting to pollinate where I live here in the Carolinas, we do have winter weather on tap. So some big changes coming in the next couple of days. Our first winter storm tracking through the Great Lakes this morning. That's going to head into Ontario and portions of New England and upstate New York here later today into tonight. The next system is going to take a further south track, bringing colder air down with it, and that is going to move across parts of the Ohio Valley and the Mid-Atlantic region and the Appalachians. And that one has some potential to bring some heavy snow for a few hours overnight tomorrow night into the first part of Saturday. And some of the areas that are really in a snow drought, portions of the Delmarva Peninsula, Eastern Maryland, South Jersey, Southern PA, West Virginia, Northern Virginia. The DC area is at risk for seeing some snow here as we get into the overnight hours tomorrow night, first part of Saturday, as we kick off President's Day weekend. I don't know if that's really a weekend or not. I just know that they're talking about it on TV. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be breaking down for you guys. Now, if you look at the satellite image right now, a couple of storms catch your eye. Actually, the one that is now affecting the North Atlantic here is, in fact, a bomb cyclone. This is the one that brought the briefly very heavy snow across the interior Northeast a couple days ago. It is tracked now to the east of Newfoundland and has bombed out. The pressure is actually down into the high 940s millibar, a very intense storm system. We've got another intense storm over the North Pacific between Hawaii and Alaska, and that is going to be the next weather maker for the West Coast. In between, we've got some faster moving systems. This is Clipper number one here around Wisconsin. That's going to move into New England here tonight into early tomorrow. And then Clipper number two here over the Pacific Northwest is going to dive farther south. And that is going to be the one that we have to track for winter weather. In addition, we've got still what you would see in a stronger El Nino, a very active southerly jet here. So some split flow. And this is going to bring more wet weather into South Texas here in the next day and then across the Gulf states over the weekend. And unfortunately, a miserable weekend expected here in the state of Florida. So just a very active setup, to say the least. But unfortunately, those of us who have not seen snow probably aren't going to, at least in the next couple of weeks, and probably not for the rest of winter, to be honest with you guys. Here's a look closer at the United States. And again, I'm going to circle the features real quick so that you can follow at home with me here. This is the first feature right here. You see this upper level trough. There's a surface low in Wisconsin that is going to track into New England tonight. Snow on the north side, mainly rain on the southern side of it. This is storm number two right here, moving very quickly into the west, and that is going to track farther south into the central part of the country tonight, and then across the Ohio Valley tomorrow during the day Friday, and then across the Mid-Atlantic region here later Friday night into the first part of Saturday, and then exiting quickly stage right. After that, we're going to see an onslaught of storms moving onto the West Coast, more heavy rain and heavy mountain snow for California and Oregon. At the same time, we've got moisture getting ready to spread across the Gulf states here. More heavy rain for parts of Texas, Louisiana, and especially for the Sunshine State as we head towards this weekend. Just a very active southern jet. The two are not going to link up, so the threat for a big, big storm is looking very unlikely over the next week or so. But we could still see something here at the end of the month of February if we can get what's coming into the Northwest to link up with what's moving into the Gulf states. Right now, I don't see a strong signal for that, but it's still in the realm of possibility. So here's a look at the weather hazards on the map. Pinks are winter storm warnings. Purples are winter weather advisories. The difference, the warnings are going to be more impactful amounts of snow. And you can see we have warnings across upstate New York, across the Intermountain West here. We have advisories over the Great Lakes and interior New England, as well as the interior of the Northwest. And we do have some wind advisories around the lower Great Lakes here, Ohio, Northwest PA, Poconos, Western and Central New York, and Western Massachusetts as well. So it's going to be getting windy as these storms move through. Here's a look at tropicaltidbits.com. It was down for a bit yesterday. If you were trying to track it, I think we had a national security threat. No, I'm just kidding about that. But we did have an outage, and back on track here. This is a look at this afternoon and tonight. Low pressure strengthening as it moves through New England and then off the coast here. Next system taking a farther south track. The reason why is you can see this big area of high pressure That is sending some pretty chilly air on down into the plains, and that is going to drive our next system to track through Virginia and Maryland here later tomorrow night and move off the coast by Saturday morning. On the warm side of these, not a whole lot of moisture in place. We will see rain, and maybe there could be some lightning strikes as well early this morning over the lower Great Lakes, and then tomorrow afternoon and evening across the Tennessee Valley and Arkansas, but not a severe weather outbreak other than maybe briefly small hail. I think this is going to be primarily known for its snow. And you can see this tracks off the coast, then very wet across the Gulf Friday, and then very wet across Florida over the weekend. Sunday looks miserable across the east coast of Florida, unfortunately. There could be some thunderstorms here, but primarily a cool rain expected and a heavy rainfall. And I don't think we're going to be dealing with flash flooding, but this is going to cut into whatever drought was left over from last summer here across western Florida and north central Florida. Having said that, we are going to reload on moisture here, and another atmospheric river heads into California later Sunday and Sunday night, followed by a second piece which moves down into Southern California Monday and Tuesday of next week. And that will eventually track back into the Ohio Valley. But at this point, we are going to see warmer air advancing through the southeastern United States and then up into the Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley. And at that point, we're dealing with rain and maybe a more active weather pattern, maybe a little bit more severe weather by Thursday into next Friday. And looks like rain by this time next week for the East Coast. So we are going to be turning warmer again, unfortunately, as there are signs of spring coming, but no threat for severe weather with that feature farther north and east. More of a rainmaker and windmaker across parts of the southeast. We are going to have to keep an eye on that severe weather threat, though, later next week. Let's look real quick at the East Coast and Atlantic Canada. You can see our big bomb cyclone still impacting Newfoundland, but that will pull away tonight. The next feature is going to clip through Maine and brush the south coast of Nova Scotia here tomorrow. Not really any snow expected outside of the ocean effect. As we get to the weekend, the second feature, even farther south, that'll avoid most of Atlantic Canada, but there is a potential to see some heavy snow moving up the east coast of Newfoundland. After that, we get to see minor systems over the weekend and early next week, tracking first through New Brunswick, PEI, Nova Scotia, and then eventually Newfoundland. Nothing major at this point, but more of a seasonal type snow. All right, so let's look at our first system. This is early this morning, and you can see it is snowing pretty moderately to even heavily over portions of central and eastern Wisconsin this morning, and as well as the UP. That snow is going to pick up in intensity this morning across lower Michigan, mainly north of Interstate 96. There'll be a wintry mix in places like Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, and rain across southwestern Michigan and northern Indiana, maybe even a rumble or two of thunder here this morning around 7 in the morning. It's going to be moving pretty quickly. In any given spot, you're only going to see about 4 to 6 hours of snow from this, but it could fall pretty heavily. We'll see it around the thumb here around lunchtime, and then moving into southwest Ontario just after lunch today, and then exiting by this evening. Behind it, some lake effect expected in bands that come off of Lake Superior and off of Huron and even off of Lake Michigan. This would be overnight tonight. And then continuing into tomorrow morning, we are going to have some lake effect coming off of Erie and Ontario into parts of PA and New York. So you can see where these bands are setting up on the NAM 3K. The next system is going to be entering the Dakotas here this afternoon and then moving through Nebraska and Iowa later on this evening and overnight. This one could produce maybe a longer duration of snow than this first system, maybe 6, 8, even 10 hours of snow, and it'll be light to moderate. But there is a possibility that there's enough energy aloft for this snow to briefly fall heavily, maybe an inch or so per hour. The chances for that would be across central and eastern Iowa here overnight tonight, and also northern Missouri late tonight and first part of tomorrow. This does look a little bit more pronounced than it did yesterday across portions of central Illinois and Indiana. And Indianapolis could see a decent amount of snow, not a big one for you guys, but maybe more than an inch falling in a few hours. And that could cause some issues tomorrow, maybe not so much in the schools, but tomorrow evening as roads could potentially ice up as this colder air moves in. We could have some travel snarls here tomorrow evening over central portions of Indiana and eventually southern Indiana, northern Kentucky, and Ohio get in on the action. Late tomorrow afternoon, this is 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 o'clock Central. And then in the evening hours across northeastern Kentucky and eventually West Virginia, western and southern PA, and western Maryland tomorrow night around 9 o'clock or so. We could be dealing with moderately heavy snowfall. That will continue into the mid-Atlantic, and I will show you that in just a little bit here. On the south side, I did want to mention We are going to see some rain showers, maybe some isolated thunder over western and central portions of Kentucky tomorrow afternoon, and a slight chance that we could have some thunderstorms over portions of Arkansas and northwest Tennessee later in the day tomorrow, about 5 o'clock central. And then after dark, you can see that continues into portions of Mississippi, Alabama, northwest Georgia, East Tennessee, and western North Carolina. But as things hit western North Carolina, we do see things fading here tomorrow night. So not exactly the best setup here for snow outside of the mountains, once again in places like Asheville and Brevard and Murphy and Andrews and Franklin. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Here's a look at snow totals from our first system. This is the NAM, and we can see snow is falling heavily this morning just north and west of Erin Hills, all the way up here towards Sheboygan. We see about 6 to 7 inches falling. A little bit less would actually stick to the ground, but enough here to cause some problems here this morning. That snow is going to pick up as it crosses Lake Michigan here this morning, and we do have the potential, according to the NAM, to see 8 or 9 inches in places like Cadillac and farther south towards Muskegon, a couple of inches as well. And we do see that as well across the Georgian Bay, the potential to see a few inches of snow here. So it's going to be pretty quick hitting, but it will be locally heavy here. Then that system moves out. Looking farther east, we are seeing snow moving into Ontario and western New York here later in the day today, around lunchtime east of the Georgian Bay, and then late afternoon around Buffalo, Rochester, and eventually Syracuse and Watertown. And there is a potential for most of us to see around an inch of snow, locally higher amounts where there is lake enhancement to the east of Watertown, as well as up towards, I believe it's Fort Drum, New York, potentially 3 or 4 inches of snow. This will spread into New England and Boston. You may actually get more snow out of this little clipper than you did the big advertised storm a couple of days ago. Same goes for Vermont and New Hampshire. The potential we could see an inch or two. Not a big deal, but certainly one that could impact you as you guys have plans to get to work tomorrow morning. And Maine also has a potential to see a few inches out of this. The NAM showing close to 5 inches in Portland. That could be a little bit high, but I could see a few inches on the ground. Even getting up to portions like Lewiston, Augusta, and Bar Harbor, we have the potential to see close to an inch of snow. Again, not a big deal for Maine, not a big deal for Vermont or New Hampshire, but we are going to take what we can get at this time of the year. There is also a potential in Connecticut and Rhode Island for a little bit of snow here later on tonight. Same for southeastern Massachusetts. But compared to what we saw the other day, really not a big deal. Across northern Pennsylvania, mainly the ridge areas see about an inch or so of snow. Higher elevations, the ski country of New York over to the Catskills, maybe a few inches. And the Poconos could pick up a quick inch of snow here as well tonight. That's going to move out. I'm going to talk about the next system here, because we're not done. We've got another one on its tail. This one tracking farther south. We'll see a few inches of snow here during tonight across northwest Iowa, and then overnight and early in the day tomorrow around Des Moines, Iowa City, Cedar Rapids, all the way over here just south of the Quad Cities into north central Illinois, and a second area that takes shape behind that and farther south across the Kansas City area. And then spreading over to just north of St. Louis. And there is a potential in both of these bands for a few quick inches of snow to fall, causing some slick travel. So do be prepared for that if you're in these two spots here. Chicagoland, most of the snow goes by to your south. Northwest Indiana, we do get some light snow, but you can see the heavier band is actually aimed south of Lafayette over towards Indianapolis and Carmel, Indiana, and a second band shaping up here to the south of Champaign and Springfield, just north of St. Louis. And these two bands are going to spread eastward here and move into southern Indiana, southern Illinois later in the day tomorrow into Ohio and northern Kentucky by evening, about 6 or 7 o'clock here. You can see the potential for a couple of inches, even around Louisville, Lexington, Fayette, those areas, even closer to an inch around Cincinnati. This is how much will fall from the sky. We will probably see lower amounts that actually do accumulate and accrete. But nonetheless, it is something to talk about here. And we haven't really had much to talk about this winter. All right, farther south and east, here is a look at what we're going to be dealing with tomorrow. This is in the afternoon. We see the snow advancing towards the Ohio River, still not really falling in West Virginia outside of the mountains and the northern panhandle. As we get to the evening, that should change, though. We will see colder temperatures flooding in out of the north and west, snow picking up across Ohio, a couple of inches, maybe to the south of to the north of Dayton and to the south of Columbus. So kind of in between the two, a couple of inches possible. And we also see the potential for around an inch around places like Parkersburg and Huntington and Charleston, all the way up to Bridgeport and Clarksburg, and even all the way up to Morgantown. We could see a couple of inches in the evening. Higher amounts are expected in the mountains, as you would expect here later tomorrow evening and overnight. You can see across Tennessee, this is going to be a very light snowfall over the higher terrain here. But across the Smokies, we do see the potential for around an inch on the south side of Gatlinburg and a few inches lined up around the state border with North Carolina and into southwestern Virginia. A little bit of snow across southwest Virginia, again, mainly elevational, and most of that comes overnight tomorrow night. And then we could see a little bit of wraparound early in the day Saturday, but that's really about it. Now I'm going to shift eastward and show you guys the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast here, where probably more than likely you live. I don't know, though. You could be chiming in from Western Maryland. If you are, that's great. Thanks for joining me today. But we do see the potential for some significant snow to come down in a short order here later tomorrow evening and overnight tomorrow night. You can see kind of two areas that we're tracking, one along the turnpike in Pennsylvania, and the second taking aim at the DMV area, which has not seen much snow this winter. And in fact, the latest run of the NAM actually, excuse me, takes the heaviest snow south of DMV. Places like, Winchester, Harrisonburg, right here into the Shenandoah Valley, and then into places like Fauquier County and Stafford and even Prince William County, potentially a couple of inches, and even all the way down close to Richmond, maybe around Kings Dominion, the potential to see an inch or two of snow, which would be more than you've seen all winter this far south. Southern Maryland, eastern shore of Maryland, southern Delaware, also potentially could see a couple of quick inches. And this is just one model run. We have seen with clippers like this, as the cold air floods in, if there is some enhanced lift, then indeed we could even see a higher amount somewhere in here. I would not be shocked if 4 or 5 inches fell somewhere across northern Virginia, southeastern Maryland, perhaps even southern Delaware. And if this shifts a little farther north, maybe Philadelphia, maybe South Jersey, Wilmington, Newark, Delaware, maybe even Dover and northeastern Maryland. So right now, generally speaking, the model is showing 1 to 3 inches of snow. And the time frame for this is going to be from about midnight to 6 or 7 in the morning. So we're talking about a 5 or 6 hour snowfall, but if it comes down close to an inch per hour, then you can see potentially a higher ceiling of 5 or 6 inches. New York City right now, it looks like everything's primarily off to your south, but I have seen models shift north and south. We learned that a couple days ago. So don't write this out as a potential issue, but it could be a little bit slick out there early in the day Saturday if you are planning to travel to New York City or the rest of the tri-state metro area. But right now, the bulk of this looks like it's going to be south of you. Richmond area, RVA, we're primarily looking at north of Goochland, north of the city of Richmond, and Henrico is seeing the best chance for an inch. Maybe even the northern neck here of Virginia, potentially an inch, and the eastern shore of Virginia is going to be right on that line. It may not do a whole lot of anything in Northampton County. You get up to Accomack, we may actually see an inch or two. So there's going to be a fine line where this moisture stops here. So that's what we're looking at. Looking at Atlantic Canada, big snow right now moving out of Newfoundland and Labrador. The next system primarily stays south of Nova Scotia. We see a small amount of snow with that. And then this clipper that we're seeing moving into the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic tomorrow night is going to take aim at southeastern Newfoundland Saturday night with a potential for about 25 centimeters of fresh snow on top of all the snow that you guys have just been dealing with. So February, I'll tell you what, if you guys really want to see snow, head over to Newfoundland. They're getting creamed with heavy amounts of snow. That's going to move away here in time for next week. We'll see some ocean effect. The Maritimes here, just some light amounts of snow early next week. Let's look at the south and look at the Gulf Coast. Heavy rain is going to move into South Texas here overnight into tomorrow, potentially a couple of inches around McAllen, an inch or so around Brownsville, Port Mansfield up to Corpus Christi. Less than that around Houston, generally speaking, less than an inch, but there could be briefly heavy amounts of rain. And then it heads into Florida here Saturday morning, and we see the I-4 corridor getting wet, and then that heavy rain shifting north. Daytona, Gainesville, Ocala, and Jacksonville, all potentially looking at a couple of inches of rain over the weekend. The Daytona 500 Sunday afternoon is looking pretty miserable, pretty wet, pretty cool, just not a great day to be out in the stands, to be honest with you guys. South Florida, not too wet at this point, but we are going to see rain overspreading here Sunday evening and Monday morning. Some places could pick up an inch or two. This is a global model. The mesoscales could show more. We'll even see this across the Bahamas, Western Cuba, and over parts of the Yucatan. So a really nasty storm for the Gulf of Mexico. A lot of wind on the western side of this as well. Mariners need to be on the lookout for that. Cruises from Galveston on down to Mexico are going to be impacted by this early next week, and just a very miserable weather pattern. And speaking of that, out west, another big one moving into California and Oregon over the weekend. And by the time we get to the middle of next week, some places will pick up 5 or 6 inches of fresh rain. That could impact the Big Sur area, could also impact northwestern California, as well as the higher elevations of northern Cal, even southern Cal, towards next Monday and Tuesday has the potential to see between 3 to 6 inches of fresh rain, causing renewed flood threats here. The interior of the West will have some heavy precipitation. A lot of y'all will be dealing with snow. Here's a look at snow totals, and you can see Park City, Utah, a fresh foot or more of snow, heavier amounts over the Tetons, and then we get over to the Sierra Nevada, and we get crushed with potentially 82 inches of snow over the next 8 to 9 days. Denver could see a little bit of snow, but most of that's going to fall across the ski areas of Colorado and Utah, where we will likely see 1 to 2 feet of fresh snow. Even Nevada is going to see snow, and it could get close to Vegas, certainly across the rim country here, and even the mountains of Southern California at risk for heavy snow. And that's where all the action is going to be out west. This is the Madden-Julian oscillation. The western half means cold in the east, generally mild in the west. Right now, we are heading out of phase 7 into phase 8. So we're kind of on the tail end of the cold. By the time we get to next week, the 20th and 21st, we start to head in the direction of milder weather across the central and eastern U.S. And this particular run shows by next weekend, we're back in mild phases across the east. So again, you've probably been watching my videos for a couple of days if you're still here, but I've been advertising colder weather in the east. That no longer is on the table here after about the 20th or so. In fact, we may have a very mild end to the month of February and beginning of March. A complete flip in what the models were showing a few days ago. Just goes to show that we can do our very best and look at all the data in front of us, but it can still change. And that is exactly what we're dealing with here. The North Atlantic oscillation, when negative, indicates blocking across Greenland, meaning all the cold air comes down into the eastern U.S., and that's exactly what's been happening here and will continue to happen. But as we head into Sunday and President's Day, it goes positive and likely stays there right on into the beginning of March here. March 1st is the end of this. And you can see the last week of February, the NAO will be positive. That is certainly not going to favor cold air moving into the eastern U.S. It will be chilly, don't get me wrong, but with respect to average, we are generally heading more into an early spring-like pattern rather than a midwinter pattern, which was being advertised a couple weeks ago. So for snow lovers, this is not what you want to see outside of maybe the Great Lakes, the snow belt areas, northern New England. When you get to New York City and on south, Boston on south, this is a signal that indicates faster moving systems, which primarily produce rainfall. So that's what we're looking at here. Here's the temperature anomaly map. You can see the cold coming down here on Friday and Saturday. That invades the Northeast, the Great Lakes, and eventually the Southeast. So a chilly weekend for the South and East. As we get to next week, though, that chill does get gradually moderated by milder air and a very mild pattern for the Great Lakes and for the Midwest here. By the middle of next week, we will see several degrees above average temperatures. There may be a brief shot of cold over the East Coast here next weekend, but that quickly rebounds. And we see the end of February ending on a pretty mild note. And I would not be shocked if we saw a few record highs somewhere in here. The West is cold by the time we get to the beginning of March, but the plains are roasting warm here. A very good sign for those of you that want to save on your energy bills. This is what you want to see. Those of you that want to see big snowfalls across the South and East are not going to like this, unfortunately. And there's nothing we can do about it other than just predict it. So thank you all so much for your time today. I hope you have a blessed day. If you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. You all, I continue to pray over. I give all the glory to God, and I thank everybody who comes here. I don't think it's by accident. I feel like you've been led to me. At least that's my personal belief. And if you don't believe me, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to certainly argue with folks, and that's not why I do this. My goal is to share the good news of what God has trusted within me to do. Colossians 3 says, if ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on things above, not on things on earth, for ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall ye also appear with him in glory. I think it's very easy to go through life and see things not work out and get fixated on what went wrong and what's not going our way. What I have learned is that there are things we just cannot control. We are going to continue to be humbled. But if we look above to God and ask Him for help, He's already given us Christ. He has sacrificed the Lamb of God. We are redeemed by the blood of the Lamb of God if we choose to believe in Christ. And so I can't control the weather. I'm going to get forecasts wrong. I think those are learning moments for me personally, places to teach people like you. And I know God has called me to do that. And that is great because forever in my life, I did not believe that. And I struggled and I struggled and I struggled and I struggled because I was setting my affection on things on earth, how much money I was making, who I was friends with, how I dealt with family, and all that stuff just crushed me personally. I was dead to all of that, not to sin. So when I was 30, I accepted Jesus Christ. And since then, things have changed. I'm focusing above rather than on things I can't even control. And I pray that that's the situation you're in. If you're not, that's okay. You may still have some time to change. You may not up to me. But either way, I want to pray for you with whatever you're going through today. So if you feel led to, feel free to go ahead and list a prayer request. If not, I'm going to pray for you anyway. Hope you guys have a wonderful Thursday, and I'll see you again tomorrow morning. See ya.